Art exists in many forms. It can either exist as a simple writing on a piece of paper, a painted portrait, or even through our vocal expressions. But not everyone is gifted with the ability to create perfect art. That is, unless they are not with SCP-067. AKA the Artist Pen. It belongs to the Safe class and is currently in a special containment sector on Site-16 within the SCP Foundation premises. When the Artist Pen is not in use or as a subject to study, it must be stored securely in a felt-lined wooden box. Before storing it, the Class B scientists must make sure the nib is corked, and they are to submit every artwork or writing created by the pen to the SCP Research Command Station for the required analysis and further experimentations. SCP-067 looks just like a regular fountain pen created by a German supply company, although the name was expunged by the Foundation. I was, however, able to trace its origins to a factory called Pelikan in East Berlin, Germany. Don't ask me how, but from my findings, Pelikan was long in existence between World War I and II, and I was also able to get some data of its uses within that time frame. But I'll get to that later on. SCP-067 is a pale green in color, with a single red line going straight down along the side. The shell is made of oak, and the nib is actually very sharp, capable of piercing through the human skin at the slightest touch. And like most fountain pens, the subject also lacks the reservoir, but strangely enough, the nib never appears to run out of fresh ink. In addition to that feature, the pen also writes in iron gall ink, the type that is most suitable for artists, but under normal circumstances, such an ink would corrode a regular fountain pen quite fast. Multiple research done by the SCP Foundation using Class D employees suggests that anyone who holds SCP-067 immediately loses control of the hand and arm that grasps it. Although the individual maintains full sensation of the hand, they however have no control over the arm below the elbow. Some claim that it was being controlled by an unknown force stored within SCP-067, while others claim that their brain just forgot how to properly move the hand. Although this second point isn't entirely correct, it does make sense that they would say it because they had a slight headache immediately after putting the pen down. Video recordings of these experiments show that the one effect of holding SCP-067 is that the controlled hand will sometimes use the pen to write a well-detailed biography of whoever is in possession of the pen. The biography can even go as far as being very personal, from the person's name, age, date of birth, criminal records, and even fears. In some instances, the pen will also include past secrets, memories, and occurrences that happened in the person's lifetime. An example of these abilities happened with a Class D employee tagged Test Subject 1204M. During the time he held SCP-067, he began writing an almost photographic representation of a motor vehicle accident he was involved in some years earlier. The subject did confirm the story, but he also did claim to have initially forgotten some of the events that SCP-067 had written, including the one in his car accident. But the moment the pen started writing everything down, he stated that the entire memory came flying back to him. In his words, he could even taste the blood in his mouth. Another occurrence was with Test Subject 1250M. Apparently, at one point in time, the man got so drunk that he unknowingly killed a woman he had an argument with using a bottle he held in his hands. He woke up the next day with no memory of what had happened the night before. But the moment the pen started writing out the events of that night, the man immediately fell into a coma-like state for 3 minutes before regaining consciousness. In an interview with the subject, he claimed his mind traveled through time, and he could see clearly the woman he killed, but he couldn't remember anything after, nor did he have the memories of his brief coma-like state. Although the results of this particular experiment might be traumatizing for subject 1250M, it does however confirm that SCP-067 can write events in a user's life that they initially had no memory of or may have forgotten. And the coma could just be the man's reaction to his apparent vision. But anyways, more experiments also confirm that subjects holding SCP-067 can also create intricate works of art even without the user having a formal art training or previous artistic prowess. One of such example was a young woman tagged test subject 1102F. Before using the pen, she had no history in being a good artist, nor did she even understand art in general. But the moment she held the pen, she was able to draw something she had no idea of: a winged creature with close resemblance to SCP-469, a creature that feeds on sounds and sound waves. Initially, I dismissed this data as just a regular coincidence, but after realizing that art can exist in a form of sound, it immediately felt like SCP-067 was drawing something it either despised or was scared of. It could also just be a coincidence, but for now, I'm on the fence. In an interview with subject 1102F, she explained that her arm didn't feel like her own anymore the moment she picked up the pen. She also further stated that she could control her arm if she wanted to, but chose not to because she was impressed by what her hand was drawing. And after some time, the hand stopped drawing and she regained full control of her hand. I can confirm from this interview that subjects under the influence of SCP-067 freely relinquish their control of their hand to the pen so that it can complete whatever it wants to do. Strangely enough, the subjects also ignore commands against drawing or writing even at gunpoint, to which they claim it is because of a strange feeling of empathy, admiration, and cooperation between them and SCP-067. In the later years to come, the SCP Foundation also attempted to test the artist pen on other living creatures, besides humans, to which the Foundation made use of a male rhesus macaque that was taught how to use a pen and marker. However, the experiment was written off as inconclusive, with the major highlight of the whole ordeal being the subject's change in behavior once it got a hold of the pen. Oddly enough, the Foundation never attempted further experiments of this nature since. I'm not exactly sure why, but I do think it has something to do with the IQ of the being that is holding it, which takes us back to the origin of the pen. Although the Foundation did register it as a product of a German company called Pelican between the era of World War I and II, I do, however, believe that SCP-067 has long existed even before these events, and due to the traits it bears with SCP-035, also known as a possessive mask, I can go even further by saying that they are both created by the same means. But while one was hell-bent on control and immortality, the other sought to create an immortal work of art. Although I don't stand by this hypothesis, but it could be possible that we may have witnessed some of SCP-067's immortal masterpiece, Form of the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci, Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare, and some self-portraits by Pablo Picasso. Like I earlier said, the artist's pen could possibly relate well with its user if the person's IQ is higher than usual, which wasn't the case for the male rhesus macaque. As we already know, the likes of Picasso, Da Vinci, and Shakespeare at the time, all three of these individuals were way ahead of their generation, which is proof of a high IQ. And just as a possessive mask searches for an immortal vessel, the artist's pen, on the other hand, searches for vessels with the potential to create an immortal art. Like I said before, this is all a hypothesis for now, with no real claims attached. That being said, I do, however, stand by the claim that it shares some kind of similarity with the possessive mask, because even though the Foundation claimed that it was created by a German factory, there is no real proof that the factory had any idea that they had such an item. My theory on this is that, just like the possessive mask, SCP-067 can transfer its abilities from one pen to another, and it has used this as a means to change users over the course of time. But how did it find its way to East Berlin? Well, I do have some thoughts on that. It is likely that SCP-067's previous owner before the Foundation was a German-based war engineer who used the power of the artist's pen to create the blueprints for his heart's desire, which to him him was a more sophisticated tank than the ones the Germans had in World War II. And to be a war engineer, the man in question must have had a relatively high IQ, which was why the pen must have related well enough with him to grant his wish. However, a machine of destruction isn't exactly the right kind of masterpiece, and I'm sure the forces around the pen realized that, which is why it had to transfer its abilities to another fountain pen that was lost in history up until it was discovered by the SCP Foundation. This theory does explain why the pen currently searches and writes out personal information about its user. It could be as a means to make sure it is never used for the wrong purposes ever again, and in the event that a person with an evil background gets a hold of it, SCP-067 could expunge itself from such a person, which could possibly be the reason why test subject 1150M went into a coma-like state during the test. I do believe that SCP-067 makes use of its art to warn people of impending danger, like it did with the Keter-class sound-eating SCP-469. Because if the pen knows something about another SCP subject, it probably has never come in contact with them before. Then it could be possible that 469 does pose an unforeseen threat to mankind and must be exterminated immediately. I am currently making arrangements with my informant within the SCP Foundation to try to get a hold of the artist's pen so I can have a hands-on feel of how the subject works, and also to improve my understanding of the subject entirely. But before I do, what do you think of SCP-067? Does it have ties with SCP-035? Leave your answers in the comment section below. Like this video if you agree with the content, and subscribe to the channel if you wish to discover more SCP subjects with me. Farewell.